Hello, welcome to UNCAGED. Today we're speaking with Colleen Slaughter. Colleen is an authentic leadership coach, an executive coach. She is also the managing partner of Authentic Leadership International. She has extensive experience worldwide working with Fortune 500 companies, non-governmental organizations, and nonprofits and business leaders from 60 countries. Colleen's living an amazing life and she's working with some really, really important folks. So excited to go through the landscape of leadership right now and what she and her team are working on. But before we get there, Colleen, let's talk a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Well, a lot of people would argue I'm no longer a spring chicken. So what would be the best parts to pull out of my background? Do you think that would be the most helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I think just probably the things that really kind of have led you to what you're focused on now.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So I'll probably use the words of one of my main coaching teachers at coaching school who said that what makes great coaches are a few things. One is their background. So in other words, what they learned from overcoming various circumstances in their childhood. And that certainly was true for me. So that's one thing. And I'll go back and fill that in. The second thing is about personal development. How much have we taken the ball and run with it and chosen to shift our perspective of things that have happened in our lives? And that's also me. I've devoted my life to it. And then he talked about a curiosity for humans, and as depicted through the arts, through cinema, through literature and poetry, etc. So that feels like a really good segue in to talk about, yeah, indeed. I mean, like, I think I can very comfortably say the majority of people probably listening came from a background that was not entirely healthy. There was a lot of dysfunction in it. I developed a lot of stinking thinking that did not serve me, right? It didn't serve me because, as we know, our thoughts precede our actions, and the actions are what create our habits, and our habits, the reality. And so, and there's a lot more I could say about it. Like, for example, I've actually done a research topic, the first of its kind ever, on adult daughters of alcoholics in the workplace. So, like, can go very deep on that topic, but to put that to the side for the moment, to say at a pretty young age, I also was really interested in getting to higher level of thinking. That's the best way to put it. And there's different avenues I pursued to do that, but that would sum it up in a relatively broad way, let's say. And then from there, as you know, I do live in France. I have quite an international background, but I grew up in Kentucky. And I have this personality that is, one might say spunky, which is one of my preferred ways to say it. It just happens to be me. But if we also look at the values that I've lived by, courage, authenticity, I also have a really strong intuition. So when I sense something is the right thing, that is the path, I've taken it in my life. I've taken it. And most of the time I hear a lot of, well, that's crazy, nuts. And a lot of times it is. For example, going from Kentucky, moving to Paris, hardly speaking the language, having no job lined up, a little bit cray-cray, a lot of people would say, but I just knew that it would work out. And yeah, and as I did, I experimented with jobs, which is very North American, not very French. Pretty much from age 18 on, they take the baccalaureate, they know what they want to do. So I was always kind of the odd operated, march to the beat of a different drummer. And experimented with being in pharmaceutical industry, working with lawyers, found myself then in graduate business school, and after that in consulting. And the reason I'm bringing all that in is because it was only when I was in consulting, which that particular firm had a partnership with a coaching school, that's when I heard about coaching. And my whole body lit up, which, by the way, has been my indicator that I'm absolutely on the right path. And I was in my very young 30s, and I said, okay, that's going to be something I'll do at some point. And I kept putting it off, as one does when one's prioritizing other things besides fulfillment. And then, circled back to it is the short of it. And it became abundantly clear that this is my purpose, both to
Yeah.
bring in everything I've learned from my, as my coaching teacher said, we coach from our wounds, everything I've learned from that, in addition to everything I've learned as an adult, growing up literally and figuratively. And it's a passion I have to help people.
Yeah,
And
I think we're at a moment really that story, your story, is really linking in with a lot of the trends and needs of today. There's a lot of focus on leadership transformation, what individuals can be doing. And so you've been really at the seat of the table here on this topic. You've been working at Authentic Leadership International now. You've got that business going from 2009 onward. So tell me a little bit about the story of Authentic Leadership International and the type of work you guys are doing.
yeah, well, thank you. I like to start by the very beginning, which might seem obvious, but it really is important in this case because I had this seed of strong intuition about it, but yet I didn't have much confidence when I started it.
Yeah.
And so I went from this really strong knowing with a capital K to, even though I majored in entrepreneurship when I did my MBA, just not feeling like I felt equipped to start this business and knowing what I
Yeah.
needed to do. And so it was part experiment out the wazoo. It was part fall flat on my face.
Yeah.
And it was part follow this knowing.
I
The
mean, I look
business.
at it honestly, Colleen, I look at the time from 2009 to today, and that to me is kind of the birth and trajectory of leadership coaching in my mind, because there was coaching before that
Yeah.
for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. But honestly, I think it was perceived negatively in the sense that, like, if you were given a coach and a company, like I was in a Fortune 500 company, and when we gave people coaches, that was usually like, Bob's not doing so well. Like, we got a problem here. And it was usually kind of a one click away of that person being out the door. Whereas now I feel like the last 15 years have seen this totally flip. And now, if you don't have a coach, if you're not working with someone, you're not on the fast track, you're not making moves. And I mean, it's an incredible change. And I really feel that the trajectory of authentic leadership has actually lived that secondary story.
Yes. And I have a few
Yeah.
thoughts around that. So what I'm hearing is maybe focus on that part. That's fine. In my experience, particularly since COVID, but not only, also from all of the different recessions we've had, right? And there have been
Yeah.
various parts depending on what part of the world we're in, et cetera. A lot of people are coming and realizing, I want to be a coach. So the other side of that, with a lot of people having a coach now, there are just masses and masses of coaches on the market.
Yeah.
However, not everybody, like, coaching is different than medical school. Let's say doctors, lawyers, CPAs, all of those three professions just mentioned, they have to pass an exam. They have to definitely be licensed and certified to be able to call themselves that.
Yeah.
In coaching, unfortunately, anybody can go, I'm a coach.
Yeah.
And why do I say unfortunate? Because I actually went to coaching school with someone who was in tears in our last day because she realized that before coaching school, she had thought she was a coach, meant well, but had done damage. And so, yes, it's true that a lot more people have coaches, but that's because the market is pretty flooded, but not all the coaches take it seriously.
Oh, no
And
doubt. All I want
yeah.
is that woman who coaches the guy in Billions. That's the coach I want. I want that
Oh, I
lady.
don't know that show. We don't have that
Oh,
here. Yeah.
it's a popular show right now, and one of the main characters is a leadership coach, and it's incredible to see.
Okay.
It paints the profession in a very, very positive and important
Oh,
way.
okay. Well, we do have important work, but see,
Yeah.
that's the thing. We have to walk the talk. It's not, and I had a number of courses where I'm teaching people around coaching, and there's such a myth that people think it's the same as mentoring or the same as
Yeah.
consulting, and it's basically telling people what to do, and it's not.
I mean, I
There's
think that one of the things that you highlighted is, this is an area that requires a lot of experience and expertise to do it right. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I think over the last 5 years, we've seen these news stories about platforms that are rolling out that offer coaching, and I'm always a little skeptical when I see that, because I'm like, I don't know how many great coaches there are out there, that can kind of just step into solutions. But I do think that what I'm trying to get at is the role of coaching has shifted, right? In the sense that I would have said that it was very much a tool of HR before, and now it's a tool to really rebuild a company. And that to
Oh, for
me
sure.
is a massive step change to where it was and where we are today, and really the impact that it's having. And Colleen, I mean, I know that you have Bolder Moves. I'd love to talk a little bit about that for sure. But also, you have a book coming out. Tell me more about what's in the book.
So actually, the two go together.
Awesome.
So my website name is a little odd, and I'm bringing this in because it's relevant. So my company name is Authentic Leadership International, but the website address is bouldermoves.com, and that can be confusing. And so a few years ago, actually more than a few, about 7 years ago, I started doing a Boulder Move of the Week, which I send to my mailing list. And that sparked the idea during COVID of writing a book. And of writing a book about these bolder moves. And originally it was going to be like a daily reader. And then it started taking on a life of its own, because as I was mentioning, walking the talk and coaching, when I read some of my earlier bolder moves, I'm like, I can't put that out in public. That is so not me. Like, that's very transactional, really salesy. That's not who I am. We got to rewrite this sucker. And then I rewrote it. And then it was again, I had done another evolution, right? And it was like, that's not me again. So I've had these, have been, rewritings, but in addition, it has a lot more sparkle to it, let's say, than the quote weekly bolder move that goes out, because there's work in it. Each reading has a piece of work, meaning an exercise to reinforce the bolder move. I don't think there's anything like it out there. Of course, in the States, there are a lot of devotionals or daily readers, and a lot of it is has a religious connotation or spiritual connotation. This one is definitely geared toward leaders. There are notions like we're talking about walking the talk, about transformation, about what it really means, but one might call elements of it. There's definitely mindfulness. But a lot of it is just about how do we truly get to be our best selves? How do we do that? Because a best version of human means best version of leader, really. And so I'm really excited about it. You can tell. And it will be out in the first quarter.
Well, I mean, kudos. It is a massive milestone to go through the process of putting a book together. And it sounds to me like you've gone through that process of writing and then rewriting and rethinking. And it's a journey for sure. But I mean, all of the areas that leadership coaching plays in right now, they're touching on really everything from just basic stuff, I would say, like maybe how someone kind of presents themselves, et cetera, but also going into deep areas like change management, conflict transformation, conflict resolution. Tell me more about what are the topics that are bubbling up right now that are really first and foremost on some of your customers' minds.
The biggest theme, if I were to sum up everything, it's meaning. More meaning at work, more meaning at home, more meaning in their lives. Like, what's it all for? Because I don't think there's anybody out there that would argue with the fact that this world is, the total VUCA world, right? The volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, most of which we cannot control, most of which is really disappointing. So what can we control? Well, literally, it's the Gandhi thing about being the change we want to be. And so learning how to create more meaning for ourselves and how that creates a virtuous circle. What are some specific topics that link with that is what I heard you ask, and I'm happy to share. So for one of the top 5 banks in the world, we've just completed a pilot program for some of their women leaders around empowerment. So first about self-advocacy, then empowering their teams, empowering the system. How does that link with meaning? Because they first need to understand what they stand for, and then they can begin advocating for themselves and for their teams. And, the chain reaction goes on. I work with another team that is based, so the bank is all around the world. That's globally. We do that virtually for the moment. I work with a pharmaceutical company, which is also global, but the particular team is mostly throughout the Middle East. And it's a really cool story because I coached the main leader several years ago one-on-one, and then she brought me in last year for some coaching virtually with her team. Then we were in Istanbul in the summer. Now we're going again to Casablanca in Q1. But what is that all about? Well, she's had a dream to create a very strong resilience program. She herself had burnout. She noticed her team members doing that. And so she started meditating, doing yoga, noticed an enormous difference, wants to gift that to the people she works with. And now it's taking on a life of its own. Well, we're helping it create a life, but because we're now we've rolled it out to leaders, and now we're rolling it out to what we call the champions of that, where they can roll it out further. And there's everything from that to, I have an up and coming utilities company I'm working with here locally. The CEO is English, so the rest is very French, but he's very English. And it's with a big investment from an American company. So there's some cultural differences going on. There's a lot of pressure to get this company up to a whole different level. And a lot of it has to do with his leadership style.
Yeah.
And I encounter that a lot with people I work with one-on-one, which is a lot of these leaders, awesome, right? They love the empathy, the care, and don't get me wrong, number one way to motivate people, and I love it. Sometimes what happens with leaders like that sometimes is we get afraid to have, or often I find we get afraid to have those courageous conversations. So that's a big topic, is courageous conversation as well.
Yeah.
Because what happens then if you look at the Patrick Lencioni model, which starts with trust, and then the next one up, once we trust each other, is having those courageous conversations. So if we're not having them, at the very top is results. The results get blocked.
Yeah.
And there's so many fellow people pleasers. Hey, first in line gang, I've worked through that, but I know what it's like. So many out there. So helping people understand that even conflict, and you mentioned conflict resolution, conflict management, the Mandarin symbol for conflict, right? And I don't speak Chinese, but I do know these two brush strokes, and one is danger and one is opportunity. So yet again, it's looking at our perspective of what this conflict means and what's the opportunity in it.
I love that. I mean, I think a lot about the discussions that organizations have, and I think there's been a lot of focus on making sure that the work environment is copacetic, that it's open to all, that we make it an environment and a mission that speaks to every team member. There's been a lot of focus on that. However, conflict is a really interesting one. I would argue that nothing transformational happens without conflict. I mean, you're going to have to push and break and challenge. And in fact, actually, it's one of the things that I see right now with some of the companies that I work with, which is it's easy for companies to slip into a mindset of what I kind of call like big company sleepy mode, which is like, just making sure that we're on the mission. We're making sure everything's copacetic, everything's nice. However, gotta break plates. If you're not breaking plates, we're not moving forward. So it's a real,
we're not
it's a real
adapting
challenge
to the environment that we're in.
Yeah. And it's been a really interesting time, I think. There's been some wonderfully public stories. I think probably the one that captured the imagination for a lot of folks on this side of the pond was what happened with OpenAI recently. That was, I don't know if you saw this AI company that just literally imploded in front of all of us and then restructured, and who knows what's happening. I'd be curious kind of like how, I don't know if that story was resonating in Europe at all or with the leaders that you worked with, but it was really kind of a story where there was kind of a dysfunctional board, right? A board that somehow was struggling to understand how it fit in. Has that been something that you've come across with like board work and how they relate to a company?
All the time.
Yeah.
Top teams, I would, for my word, would be top teams all the time. Why? Because they're made up of humans.
Yeah.
I mean, I have actually been shocked, to be transparent, that some of these leaders that are huge leaders leading these multi-million, even billion-dollar companies, the level that they're at with themselves. It's shocking. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's normal because everywhere we go, there we are. Right. So if we're not doing our own work and we show up as part of a team, well, it's only normal that the team's going to be a bit more dysfunctional. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that happens all the time. We get called in all the time to work on top teams. And actually, I love that work
Yeah.
because when people, the light in their eye starts twinkling because they realize that it is a win-win-win. And to your point earlier, that it used to be coaching was remedial, if you will, or, help
Yeah.
fix this person. That's happened to me once or twice. Most of the time, it's people wanting to build on it.
Yeah.
But when the light goes off and they realize
I,
that not only did they get happier, the team is happier, the
yeah.
results are higher.
I actually think that there's a little bit of a generational thing here. For me, it was those conversations when kind of the younger end of millennials started to step into larger roles in the company, and they were just very open. They were very open, kind of like, well, this is what I need. This is how I work. This is how this is going to work best. And for organizations, sometimes you hear that and you're like, okay, like that's definitely not how Gen X was raised, where we were told, like, this is the company, do what the company says, right? And it was one of those wonderful moments where you realize, like, wow, we're going to have, we have to really think about how we build a different type of a business now. Like, it's a much more open environment. People are trying to be more holistic in terms of how they're kind of embracing their full selves. And it's been an interesting ride. I mean, I would say that now one of the topics that comes up a lot, Colleen, with a lot of our guests is this whole shift back into the office versus like working at home, and how people are going to find that happy medium, and how do you find that, ability to work together with that. And that, I can still see that causes a lot of strain and stress for folks. It'll be an interesting topic. Has that been something that's come up for some of your customers?
So in 21 and in the first half of 22, it was a big topic. Like,
Right.
how do we do this in an optimal way? Now, what's coming up now is that sense of isolation and missing sense of belonging,
Yeah.
because that belonging topic has been very hot off the press. And the way that I would, in my word, it would be connection, missing sense of connection with others, which is a direct byproduct of the working from home and not having direct contact with people as often as we used to.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a level 2 need in Abraham Maslow, right? The hierarchy of needs. So it's huge. It's the whole basis why people have unhealthy coping mechanisms, right? And if that gets then, think about all, I can look back in my life, some of the best friends I've made through work or some kind of a work circumstance.
Yeah.
And so if that gets dulled down because we're not having as much physical direct one-on-one contact, that's where people are feeling lost. They're not feeling as connected, a sense of meaning. So actually a big part of the work I do is helping people reestablish that connection with themselves, and then of course with others, which is part of that meaning that gets re-injected into them and into the organizations, which is what helps people then, like you mentioned earlier with us Gen Xers, right, being more motivated outside in. The millennials, and I look at my daughters, Gen Zs, right, they're very much more inside out. Like,
Right.
how does this line up with my values?
Right.
Which actually I totally think is a better way to do it,
It's
right? It's lining
amazing,
up.
right? I completely
Yeah, now
agree.
they're going to change the world for sure. They're not waiting on an organization to do it. They're going to do it.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think that there was a lot of, you get a bunch of old folks together, they start to kind of, complain about those types of things, but the reality is that it's brilliant. It's actually wonderful.
That's
And
what
and
we
and it
actually
only,
help
yeah,
leaders develop into, is
yeah,
leading from inside out. Yeah.
exactly. It's wonderful. Well, listen, Colleen, you have your book coming out in
I have my
2024.
book
So
coming out,
yeah, so
and
let's talk about 2024 because I
let's
mean,
talk about
the
that
year
for
is going to
sure.
start with your book coming out. What's on the
Crazy.
docket for you, and really kind of what do you see for next year in general in
Yeah,
terms of
well, thank
topics?
you. I'll have my book over the line. I want to have an app with it. So anybody that knows about kind of daily reader apps, it'll be similar to that. So one could either do Kindle or the book or the app. I'm going to continue to grow my business. So I have this wonderful relationship with, I'm currently working with 4 big clients, and there's just a lot of repeat, coming back, looking at working with other groups, going deeper with current groups. So that will continue. I would love, so the next thing after this first book is either going to be right away my second book, which I think it will be, because I'm going to take the thesis I mentioned earlier and make that a book, because I've had feedback that the world needs to read this. There's no other topic like this seriously in the business world. And
Awesome.
so I'll likely make that a book. But I was going to say the one vying for it is a TED Talk, because I TED Talk too. So we'll see which one will win out. But it might be the book because I already have most of it written. But yeah, I'm just going to keep enjoying expanding on. I'm learning recently about truly being the CEO of me, talking about the CEO, right? And what I mean by that more is there's not someone who's going to knock on a door. Here, Colleen, here's the vision you wanted, right? That is for me. And so I love to write. I love to speak. So doing more of these things, developing more relationships with more clients. I think you'll just see me a lot more. I started getting a lot more visible in the last 7 months.
Mhm.
And it was actually a big step to do that for me. And again, anybody that's had a similar background to mine can probably attest, but it's a huge leap to kind of that sense of worthiness. And
Yeah.
so I'll keep doing that. I'll keep bringing attention to the topics that matter to me, notably around my thesis. It's been on my agenda to start writing for some top business journals
Hmm.
on that topic around adult children in the workplace, because it affects 25% of the world and
Hmm.
nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
Right. So like to normalize that. I see myself very much like the Sia or the Alanis Morissette, the business world of business coaching. So I'm quite,
Excellent.
can be a rebel
Well,
on that.
Colleen, I mean, you have a lot going on. There's a lot of new
You
stuff
indeed.
rolling out in 2024. Where's the best place for folks to find out more about what you are working on?
Well, I've said the website. So if you go to bouldermoves.com, you can either just check out the pages. If you feel like in the meantime, I want to get a taste for what the book might be about, although the book is a lot juicier than the weekly Boulder Moves. But if you nonetheless, in the meantime, would like to try out the weekly Boulder Moves, in the first half of that front page of the website, you can sign up. What I pride
Great.
myself on, I'm an American, as you know, but I've lived in Europe a long time. So I have a real kind of a different marketing than I've experienced with a lot. But the point is, I will not spam you. You won't get more than 1, maximum 2 a week, and rarely has it been 2. I just want you to enjoy the information and the learning, and yeah, it's my passion and my pleasure to be of
That's
service.
excellent. Well, Colleen, thank you so much for the time and thank you for being on the Uncaged show today. We've been speaking with Colleen Slaughter. She is the managing partner of Authentic Leadership International. And we've been speaking about the state of leadership and leadership coaching and the areas that leadership coaching can impact and change on an organization and on a person. It's a really transformational period that we're living through where business structures have been completely reinvented. And leadership coaching is really an area that has played a key role in dealing with some of those challenges that people have with self-confidence, executive presence, emotional intelligence and agility, professional relationship development. etc. So Colleen, I'm going to tell people to go to bouldermoves.com, check it out, and you'll get to
Just
see
reach out
her,
if you want and just say
her new
hi.
book.
I would
Yeah,
love
her new
that.
book is coming out in the new year, and it's been wonderful having you on the show, and we look forward to having you back.
You too. Thank you very much.
Cheers.